You provide raw materials for most of these vaccines. What exactly do you mean by raw materials?
Yeah, thank you for having us today. I'm excited to be here. We play a pretty critical role in the development and ultimately in the production of any approved vaccine. We're going to be providing a whole host of materials, really ingredients that would go into the actual production of these vaccines and many components that would actually be part of the final formulation that would be injected into the patient as part of the administration of the vaccine. So our supply chain is going to be really critical as we think about bringing this pandemic to an end.
So just how much of these raw materials do you have to actually make? I mean, we're all concerned about how quickly vaccine makers can ramp up supply once they do have an actual candidate, but it would sound like you have to ramp up supply for all of these vaccine makers, or most of them.
Yeah, so we're going to be exposed to most, if not all, of the candidates that are being developed and supported, particularly by Operation Warp Speed. And we've been working collaboratively with our customers really since the second quarter to get our materials specified into those processes and to enable their development. There's at least 4 different modalities that are being developed, and obviously we're unsure as to which ones, if any, will ultimately get approved. But we stand ready to supply our materials as soon as we get the word.
Will you be supplying companies outside the United States as well? So, for example, a World Health Organization collaboration is aiming to deliver 2 billion doses of vaccine next year. Will your raw materials be part of a lot of those vaccines too?
Yeah, the scale of what we're talking about here is pretty impressive. In fact, there's never really been a therapy or a vaccine that's been distributed this widely before. Given our scale and our role in this ecosystem, we are certainly engaged with all of the leading candidates around the world, and we'll be looking to leverage our manufacturing and distribution capabilities to serve vaccine production wherever it happens to be.
Now, what kind of raw materials do you need to make your raw materials? Is there any kind of supply issue, or can you get your hands on everything you need quickly and cost effectively?
Yeah, this is definitely going to stretch all of our supply chains, going back to even our raw materials suppliers. We've been hard at work over the last couple of quarters trying to identify where bottlenecks could exist, and as you suggest, it's going to be critical that we're able to source all of the raw materials that we need for our processes. And we've been out making commitments and securing that part of our value chain. And then, obviously, within our own factories, we're going to have sufficient labor. And so we've been aggressively hiring and training and onboarding everything that we would need in order to be able to produce the vaccines. And then the physical assets, the capacity that we would need in order to produce our materials. There's certainly expenditures and investments that we've had to make along the way. And some of those capacities will come online this quarter, and we'll phase additional capacity expansions into next year as we move forward. But I think everybody in this space is working to bring to bear as much capacity as we possibly can.
Yes, and apparently raw materials account for more than half the cost of at least the messenger RNA vaccines that are in development. Is there any way that you can bring some of those raw materials costs down at any stage, Michael? Or will that be an issue? Will these vaccines just get paid for one way or the other by governments or agencies worldwide?
I think the focus, has been to obviously, bring these vaccines to market really in record time, and really been focused on the development and the performance and the efficacy of these vaccines. I imagine as the vaccines mature and to the extent that these are going to be needed into the future, there'll be a lot of work to optimize and to address the cost associated with these vaccines, and we'll certainly play an important role in doing that. But the focus today is getting a vaccine to market and bringing an end to this pandemic.
So who do you compete with, Michael? And if nobody, then how did you manage to come up with the magical formula, if you like?
Yeah, the types of materials that we provide, we use in other therapies that are in the marketplace today. And so you have a little bit of a reference point as to what it would cost us to produce these components and materials and solutions. And, we do business with most of these customers in other, parts of their portfolio. And so, it's pretty straightforward in terms of how we would extend the pricing into these vaccines. In many cases, we already have programs in place.
So Raymond James is looking at this potential market as a $1.6 billion market for bioprocessors like yourselves. Is that the size of market that you're aiming for? What kind of revenues are you aiming to see maybe in 2022?
Yeah, we haven't really been able to quantify specifically what the revenue upside would be specific to Avantor. We've tried to look at what it would mean for the market at large, recognizing that there are so many unknowns at this stage. As I mentioned earlier, there's 4 different modalities that are being developed, and each one of those workflows has dramatically different requirements for raw materials and consumables. And so, ultimately, the market opportunity here for raw materials and consumables is going to be, greatly influenced by what mix of technologies ultimately get produced, the number of doses that ultimately get administered, and what the society's willingness to take these vaccines will be. But as we look at what's been publicly announced and what could be available from each of the candidates, we've talked with our investors and our shareholders about anywhere from a $4 to $5 billion impact to the raw materials environment at large, all the way up to something as large as $8 or $9 billion.
Wow, 8 or 9 billion, which would be multiple the amount that Raymond James sees. And I should point out that there's something like 18 buys on your stock right now, and out of 20 analysts. Have you spoken with both President Trump and President-elect Joe Biden, or either, both?
Yeah, no, we haven't specifically spoken to the administration. Our contacts would be coordinated directly with General Perna and the Operation Warp Speed. I think we're probably on speed dial at this point, and would be in very close coordination with that team that's obviously looking to coordinate ultimately the supply chain and the distribution of these vaccines.
Michael, I want to ask you one more question that's slightly, left field. The drug distributors sold off big time the other day when it was announced that Amazon was going to get into, not supplying, but, offering drugs, I guess, to Prime members in particular. Was that warranted? Do you see that being a disruptor in the supply part of the model that, that UPS might take over from McKesson or something?
Yeah, that's probably not our area of expertise. We're going to be involved in getting ingredients to our customers and supporting them in their production. So probably wouldn't comment on the process downstream of that. But I would be surprised if there were significant changes to the supply chain at this stage, given the criticality of the supply chain. And it's important to note that there are some really special handling requirements associated with these vaccines. I think it's been widely, talked about here of late that the Pfizer vaccine, for example, needs to be stored at really low temperatures, and you need a really specialized supply chain in order to, to facilitate that. So I suspect that any, dramatic changes in the short term, would be limited.